language,
I
Steve.
know.
Good morning.
I know. Good
Big
morning.
hamburger guy here. Look at
I
me.
know.
I
I
love
know you are.
hamburgers.
I'm the
How
same.
are you
I'm the
today?
same. I'm doing well, mate. I'm doing well. And for our
Have
audience,
you
if
had a
you,
hamburger?
oh,
I'm sorry, before you get to
no,
your,
have I had a
like,
ham?
subscribe, give us comments, all that fun stuff. Did you ever have a hamburger? Because I remember a few weeks ago you said you hadn't had a hamburger for months.
I did make my own hamburgers, and I did
Oh,
have
good.
hamburgers. Yeah, so I did. I did.
All
I
right.
did. Well, it was April was
Good for you.
hamburger month, so thank you. Yes, but
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah, and I guess I'll get into the spiel
Yeah.
as you mentioned there. So if you
What
are
is this?
first
What is
time
this
on the
show?
channel, OSW Daily, Mike and I are each weekday mornings. Well, most weekday mornings. So if you like what you hear, please help us grow the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. And today, Mike, there's a few things I want to touch on.
Okay.
Gensler work from home survey. I really want to get into that. And then there's a
Oh,
couple of things that came across in the media that I saw this morning about why do people want to return to the office and what should they be expecting. And also there was an interesting comment that I saw on work from anywhere and sort of the premise of working from anywhere as we think about the workplace of the future. But before we
great.
jumped on here, you did mention that you watched yesterday's episode, and you had some
Did
comments, and there's things that you wanted to touch on. So let's look after
well.
you first, Mike.
Well, the funny thing is the question, what is this morning? I just said, it's because my wife just said to me, every morning for 2 months I've been getting up, getting ready. She does the same. We're sharing the bathroom. It's all this kind of commotion as I get ready for my day and meet you here, and she gets ready for hers. She's like, "What is that thing you do every morning?" She asked me, "What is that? What is that you're doing? Is it a podcast?" I said, "No, it's not a podcast. I'm on YouTube. It's
That's
and
funny.
Facebook now. It's a live stream. It's
It
live
is.
broadcasting."
It is. It is. It is.
And
But
so it was funny that we just get into our routines and nobody really knows what we're doing. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad we had this conversation. We did hit kind of a milestone yesterday, and that's what I was reflecting on this morning as I rewatched it, is that it was 2 months of give or take that we have been doing these daily chats, and I really appreciate them, and they help me get my day started. And we've been through the roller coaster ride. Some days you
yeah,
in a down place or struggling. I've certainly had my moments of struggle and frustration and Zoom fatigue, and hitting the digital wall is my new phrase that I certainly have embraced and not ashamed to admit. And you said, hey, two dudes talking about this stuff and being able to share their emotions and know that things aren't always great. You don't always put on that happy face and have to put on that strong facade. We do have feelings and we have, ups and downs in our lives. And I think that helps people, feel like they're not alone and that there are ways to get through these things. And if you don't have a community of people, please try to build one, try to reach out, connect through social media, LinkedIn, all the different channels. But if we serve as that kind of friend base or that community of workplace enthusiasts who are in the same boat you are, working from home or waiting to get back into the office or preparing for that return to work, you have people who you can lean on and ask questions. Certainly I think if I don't see what's on your screen today, but I'm sure you've got the email on the screen. Please send us a note. Let us know you're watching. If you have any questions, things we can help with. But as
yep.
far as yesterday goes, towards the end, you were saying that, there's not a lot of new things, but then you can't kind of turn the table on me today and said you got a lot of new things to talk about today, which I'm excited to hear because I don't know any of those things, the Gensler study and so forth. But I was going to say we should frame a conversation around the broader society and what we're seeing in the broader society and what we're experiencing through different people's attitudes, different people's opinions, different people's approach to returning to public life in whatever forms that's taking. And certainly coming off the weekend, the Memorial Day holiday, where so many people went out and got out and started living what you were calling a return to a normal life in some capacity, different states, different examples of that. And we're not going to be like making political statements or governmental policy. That's not our role. But I think that's a reflection of what we're going to see in our workplaces. And I wonder if you've thought this through, that the fact that, as vast as the society is and has as many different people with different opinions and different perspectives there are out there in public, and we're seeing that reflected in the news and the way people are approaching this virus and the way they're going to kind of live with COVID-19, that same broad spectrum of attitudes is going to come into our workplaces and going to be kind of coming back as we reopen the office we're going to put protocols in place. We're going to have policies. We're going to have, corporate decisions about how things should be looking. But then it comes down to, is the employee base, is the workforce buying in? And I wonder if we could kind of draw some parallels about opinions and how people may approach some of the things that are going to be, part of our new working world, and how workplace leaders like yourself and my friends in the FM and workplace community have to address those people and communicate to them the reasons for these policies. And it's an interesting conversation, I think.
No, it is. And it's interesting whenever, well, I say interesting, I'm glad you started where you did, Mike, to be honest, because as you know, yesterday we surpassed 100,000 people dead from this virus in the US. And you sort of think about that, that's a huge number. We talked yesterday about the sobering or the immune or I don't know, we just accept it. It's a number that's it's so big. But whenever you consider there was 2 fatalities in February, and there was 58,000 people have died from this in the US at the end of April. That sort of puts into perspective actually the implication of what has actually happened still in this country with COVID-19 in the month of May. And you're right, as we did look and we saw the images from over the Memorial Day weekend of what that means for society. Now, to take that and then talk about that in a workplace environment, yes, society is getting out and it's actually trying to be socially interactive and socially, responsible in their behavior and so on and so forth, right? But then you take that and you put it into a workplace environment. Organizations are still saying we've got to be cautious. We've got to take our time. We're not rushing back. We're going to be, we don't need to be first. We're going to take all the precautions. We're going to take all guidance from CDC, from the World Health Organization, from local government, states, mayors, whatever that is, to actually enable people to go back if they want to. Most people, if they want to, we do know there are instances where people may not have so much of a choice, but in essence, we still need to have all of those protections in place, and employees need to feel safe, organizations need to feel safe. And, we just have to be reminded that this is still a rampant virus that is actually circulating in our population. And I think organizations and workplace leaders are actually still making sure that everything will be okay for those that do want to get back to the office.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference. You're right. There's a distinction between this audience that we're talking to generally, the folks that are able to work from home. Although I've had surveys each week on my live stream, I did it again yesterday, and there's a percentage of folks, it's a minority among our network, I would call it, that is bored at home and ready to get back, and they need to get back. And they may not be able to right away because those policies, as you described, may not permit them to get back. But there's also those anecdotal stories for me, but I'm sure they're broader. If you expand the view to beyond just corporate real estate office settings, you've got a lot of organizations that are operating today in some mixed capacity. They may have their headquarters offices, which are very sparsely populated, if at all, but you've got they're also manufacturers, they're also distributors, they're transportation companies. There's all kinds of workforces that are actually working through this pandemic and have been for the last 2 months, but it's ramping up rapidly. And I've heard from, again, anecdotal stories. I can't put any kind of statistics to it, but there are places in this country, Texas and other places, where offices reopened a couple weeks ago and everyone was expected to come back. And it was, maybe it's an accounting firm or a law firm, I don't know, but there are organizations, unlike the big Silicon Valley players, these very forward-thinking, progressive companies that are saying you don't ever have to come back, work from home forever. That's, I think, the exception. And you and I, those are the people we hear about because that's what we're concentrated on in our workplace-focused existence here of content and what you're reading, what I'm reading. But I think we need to, again, I think it's always a good, healthy idea to get out of our personal bubbles, our personal perspective, and start seeing the broader view. So do you see any concerns, and maybe not in your workplace specifically, but among your network and people you talk to, do you anticipate, even if you haven't seen it yet, a scenario where, yes, the office is reopened, yes, all those protocols are in place, come on back, and there are going to be people, and we've talked about this, we hoped and we kind of expected that in our little forward-thinking workplace evolutionary type minds that workforce leaders, organization leadership will say, it's up to you, flexibility, choice. You work from home if you want to. If you're not comfortable, psychological safety. If you're not ready to return, we want you to be comfortable where you are. Stay working from home. But that's more of an ideal, I think. And there's going to be some managers that say, I need you here and we need you here and the office is open. And once we get past those restrictions about space and we have enough room for you, we need you back. And there are going to still be people that are concerned, as you have expressed, hey, I'm vulnerable, or I don't feel comfortable yet, or this virus is here and I don't want to go back into a public setting of any kind. What happens then? And that's kind of that broader picture. The people who don't want to come back, and the people who have to come back, or those people that are, again, the same group, and it may be a minority right now, but they're certainly highlighted on the news, the ones that just don't think this is a big deal and feel like it's way overblown and there's no need to wear masks. There's no need for social distancing. And when I get back into my office, just like I was in the grocery store, I'm going to plow my way down the aisle and walk close to strangers and reach across and grab that can of soup, whether I'm in your space or not, within 6 feet or not. Those people are going to be in our offices too.
Right.
How do we deal with that? How do we workplace leaders prepare for that scenario? And what does it look like? Have you thought that through?
Man, you're firing today. I don't know what you had for breakfast, mate. I tell you, what's in that cup there, But well done you, mate. Well done you. All right, so there's a lot in there, right? So let's unpack a little bit. Where I think the majority will be, majority of organizations and leaders will honor the statement and the sentiment of if you want to stay at home because you feel safe. And I think they will do that for a period of time. And I don't know how long that will be, but I do believe that the majority will do that. Yes, there will always be a minority that do something different, that behave differently, and that's always, and a lot of it will be around the local environment. Right, so we've talked previously how in Australia there's been very little cases, so therefore the reaction there is somewhat different, and we're seeing through parts of America where there's been very little cases of COVID-19 also, so therefore you can anticipate and expect a different reaction. There are also those people who believe that who may have lost a job, that if everything opens then they will then get a job, and therefore that's why there is that requirement or the demand or the ask for things to reopen and get back to normal. But I do believe the majority of organizations who have come out and said, the larger organizations granted, that will actually honor what that is. But it's a sort of dovetail from what you've said in the questions, and I'll go into the Gensler survey because I think it kind of ties in. It ties in, and I'll pull up, and I appreciate you haven't seen this, Mike. So it basically comes through, and what it's showing is the reasons why people want to go into the office. And I'll read through the first three, Mike. It's scheduled meeting with colleagues. It's socializing with colleagues. It's impromptu face-to-face interactions. They're all scoring at 54%. The conclusion from what we're seeing here is 74% of people want to go back to the office because of social interaction with their colleagues. And I think that's been consistent what's been said and what we needed to do. But what I found really interesting was 51% saying that they need to be back in the office because they want to feel up to date with what the workforce is actually doing, which I find very interesting actually. That's surprising me. I actually think
is it
is because my thinking is that I think organizations are really communicating what people are doing. Again, look, all I can do is speak about my experience and those people I connect with and what I'm hearing from their organizations, and that's all it's based on, right? There are probably I actually think smaller organizations, those leaders that I'm speaking to, they're actually being more informative. They're sharing more information. Yeah. They feel like they're doing so much more, and they feel that much more connected.
True.
So, but again, there will always be that minority. But again, it's really interesting whenever we look at sort of the key reasons why people want to get back to the office. And one of the other
But it
things
was
was,
over 50%. I'm sorry to cut
yeah,
you off.
yeah, no, it
Over
was.
50% were concerned about that.
Yep.
And I wonder if that is based on, well, it must be based on their current experiences. I was going to say based on my previous life, because I've always been a remote worker.
Yeah.
And I would just say very briefly that I've had that kind of feeling, and not in a bad way, but just kind of a fact of life, that as a remote worker here in Washington, D.C., my headquarters for iOffice is based in Houston, Texas, that there was no way for me to be as connected in the know about office, dynamics and things going on. And I always felt a little bit of an outsider, not for anybody's fault. There was always a good communication stream coming and information about what's going on. I even had access to the general office Slack, thread, which would show me what's going on in Houston. But I didn't really spend much time on it because it was like, hey, there are donuts in the break room, or, we've got Taco Tuesday and come on out. So I felt a little bit like, I can tell maybe some of your respondents there that you're mentioning or thinking or feeling. But in this current environment, I'm as connected as anybody else in the organization. I feel like we're all in the same boat. We're all working from home. I'm on Slack 10 times more than I ever was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I feel more connected, and I actually, in an ironic way, kind of one of those silver cloud moments is that our silver lining of the clouds moment is that I feel more connected. I've gotten to know more of my coworkers in Houston and elsewhere, in Salt Lake. We have people in Winnipeg, Canada. All these people from across as you probably do, and you've mentioned this, right? You feel better connected. Yeah. So I don't know where that concern comes from, other than if things change and we open the office, some go back, some don't. Those that choose or cannot go back for whatever reason, maybe it is that fear of the virus and anxiety and don't want to return. They want to continue working from home. That's where you'll see all of a sudden these divides, the tribal divides. Because right now we're all in this together.
Right.
But in that scenario, what it's like, well, Betty's not coming into the office. She's what's wrong with her? Or George decided to work from home, and this pandemic's pretty much wound down. We're back to normal here. That's where maybe those concerns come in. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is a good point. And just the other thread I sort of pick of what you just said there is, whenever you're in the office, how connected are you to everyone else in your office, right? If you're across 3 floors, do you feel connected to somebody sits on another floor because you're in the same building? I don't know. Don't get me wrong, right? The absolute, what do I miss about being in the office? It's connection to the team, right? It's those the jokes, the side conversations, little whiteboard session where maybe you're not part of a conversation, but because you're there, you get put into it, which I think was what you're sort of mentioning with the Slack, is like you don't pay attention because you're not part of that, where whenever you're in the office environment, you actually get the ability to do that. But I find it very interesting. I want to pull up another slide that was put up here. And the headline's a little disturbing for me, just because it's the negative connotation from an architecture firm that's sort of been highlighted here. Only 12% of US workers want to work from home full time. Most want to return to the workplace, but with critical changes. So it's interesting. So I think it's like 2-3% of the workforce today works from home, works remote. This is an increase full time. Yeah. So this is an increase to 12%. That's a huge shift. But then there is another, 30-40% that actually want to work from home part of the time. They want flexibility. And then there's 44% that says, no, they don't want to work from home at all. They want to go to the office. What was interesting is whenever I was having a conversation with this, it was a female, and she goes, I wonder how many of that 44% are men who just want to get out of the house for a little bit. I didn't comment, but I was just a comment that was made to me, But what I find interesting is, has this really shifted the mentality of what people wanted, in a sense of, because of COVID-19, this is what I want? Or is this what people always wanted? And because of COVID-19, the opportunity to now get it and for organizations to give it is now here. It is just that something went through my head. And I suspect even the 44% who said that they want to be in the office all the time, you know, you're a remote worker, but you're often on the road and that's part of what you do. So even at
Yeah.
44%, they're not always going to be in the office. They're going to be traveling, they're going to be, you know, vacationing, whatever it is. So then you have a look at those subsets. You have 44% want to be in the office all the time. You have another 40% that want to be in the office part of the time. So you're down to like, you know, what's that, 55% of people that are going to be in the office all the time. Today, utilization, as you know from all the data you guys collect as well, utilization is about 63%. The shift
Yeah.
is down a little bit. So if you're 53%, the value of real estate, the cost of it, the value, the cost of the actual organizations then gets really looked at from a absolute cost base. What's going to be then more interesting is whenever we are able to look at during COVID, when everyone's working from home, where we have the old environment where it was for a lot of organizations, it was everyone in the office 100% of the time. Whether they came into the office 100% of the time, we can debate that. Or this new model that we do going forward, and which was the most productive environment, right? And productive
Yep.
environment
Yep.
means, in other words, creating new products, generating additional revenue, bottom line improvements, right? That's what the whole objective, that's the whole purpose of an office. It's to bring people together to generate shareholder value, right? That's our stakeholder value. That's the whole purpose of everything that is we do. So which scenario produces that for the organization?
Sure.
So that's a lot in there.
Sure.
Apologies.
A lot there to think about, and interesting takeaways for me. I'll tie it into what another video I saw this morning on CNN. There was an interview with the actual CEO of JLL, which is a guy based in Germany or Belgium, somewhere over there in Europe. And he was basically saying that the reporter, it was a very quick, CNN international broadcast. The reporter's like, your business is going to be going away, right? Because leases will be, not renewed and no one needs office space anymore. And the reporter was just going on the assumption that everybody's going to continue to work from home after this, life goes on now with COVID-19 and beyond. And he was like, well, I don't think so. Basically, our research indicates what you just said, is that 80% of people want to get back to the office in some way, shape, or form. So to drill down on some of the specifics there, I think the big shift that is certainly happening is that of that full-time work from home segment, which was very small, 3 to 4%, jumping to 12%. That's huge. That's a huge difference. And the reasons for that, as you alluded to, are probably twofold. It's one, hey, I didn't realize how productive I could be at home. This is great. Now that I've experienced it, I want this now. But even more so, there's probably those folks that wanted it anyway, like you kind of alluded to, that they just weren't allowed to do it because their employer said, no, you can't be as productive at home, and we need you here. I need you to be looking over your shoulder. So that's where that big jump happens. But for the most part, I think the philosophies and the strategies that you and I and the people in our community of workplace leaders have known for years, the data proves it out, is that flexibility, choice, agility, and the ability to have different spaces at home, at work, offsite, remote, co-working spaces, those things give people the chance to be their best selves and therefore be the most productive they can be for their organizations. And that is hopefully the lesson that we'll take away from this, and that people will go away with new percentages, new options, and new ideas. But we also realize that there are a percentage of people, again, getting out of my bubble, getting out of yours, we're pretty darn comfortable at home. We have great setups. We're technically prepared. We have no kids running around. We have plenty of space. We're not claustrophobic in an apartment in downtown San Francisco or downtown New York City. So we're okay for the long term working from like this. And we would choose to do so under normal circumstances. So there are those that can't. And many, that 44% who want to be back in the office, it's because they just don't have the ability to work from home effectively. And they know that. And if anything, they knew that before, and they know it even more now because 2 months they've been homeschooling their kids and living on top of their roommates or their partners or spouses. And it's like, get me out of here, like you say. So all those things, it's all makes sense. It's not rocket science. The data is there to prove what we would kind of guess from our own human experience and common sense understanding of how people behave. So virus or no, we're going to put it into that. Like I said, we're going to put it into that bucket of things that are out there. We got to add that into the formula, the calculation of I'm getting up out of bed today. Now my choices begin. How do I
Right.
spend my life? Everything has a risk. Everything has a reward, and not to diminish the tragedy of this particular pandemic and the continued pain that will come from it. It is part of a bigger picture, and everybody's going to make their choices depending on their locality and their circumstances. And I think it's going to be something interesting to watch, and we get to be there and help guide them along the way, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned so many great points. Personal circumstances is such a key factor. Um, Living in the city, I remember I lived in the city. I rarely worked from home. I didn't like to work from home. One, because I didn't have the space. I had roommates. It was easy to get to the office on a subway and there in 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Really simple.
Yeah,
Why would I want to bring work into my home where home is a place to relax, right? And that was always my viewpoint. I'd rather go into the office. Then I moved to Long Island, and I did not know that a 90-minute commute would kill me the way it did. And but I have it. I've a very nice where I'm, 2 days from home, 3 days in the office, and those 3 days in the office are
yeah,
great because I get to connect. And I think it's important that just to finish on your point was that flexibility where people do wake up in the morning and they go, what do I need to do today? Where is the best place for me to do those activities? Do I have
exactly.
meetings in the office with the team? Okay, then I'm going to go to the office. I don't have any of those, so I need to do focus work. I'm going to be on calls all day. What makes the most sense for me today to actually do the work that I need to do? And I think that's the place where I believe all workplace leaders believe that we would get to and we needed to get to. But this has
Right.
created that flexibility and the opportunity for both parties, organizations to see that what works, what doesn't work, and a lot of things that we didn't believe could work are actually working. Don't get me
Yep.
wrong, there are things that are just not working, right? And those obviously will need to be addressed as we move forward.
Sure.
But yeah, no, it was an interesting survey, and I know we didn't get on to what will change, but the interesting adverse of that is let me pull up here just before we finish up, and
Okay.
this is where Professor Gary Martin, who is in Australia, he posted, how do we behave when we get back into the office? And there's three things that he sort of mentions as we sort of think about this over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. There are going to be changes that we're going to make, handshakes. How's that going to change? What does
Mm,
symbolizing touch on our face mean when you're sitting across with somebody? What happens when someone sneezes? What happens when someone has allergies? How does that change how people connect with each other? Where today at home, I have allergies. I wasn't feeling great. I wouldn't be going into the office if because of how people would react. Washing and sanitizing your hands in front of colleagues is going to be a new thing that's acceptable behavior because it means you're hygienic and you take care and you think of other people. It's really interesting whenever you see these differences. We desire to
yeah.
get back to the office, but when we get back to that office, there are going to be seats that are cordoned off that you can't sit in. There's going to be notices everywhere, and there are going to be changes in behavior and how we're going to. Um, I don't say judge, but in essence, we will be on their behavior, on their actions, and we'll be making assessments on that. So that's a really interesting reverse of what we just talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to talk about this more tomorrow. We're out of time today, but boy, that excites me. Those types of conversations around the cultural changes and some
Yeah.
of the protocols just around, like you said, washing your hands and shaking hands. Those are things that I'm very fascinated by. And it kind of ties into with that whole discussion around the broader society, the things we're going to see change in our societies overall here in the US and other places, and then how it impacts us in the workplace. And there are definitely connections. The way we behave in a workplace is the way our culture tells us it's okay to behave. There's some differences, and we'll get into those. But boy, as a germaphobe, as a lifelong germaphobe who's had that little moment of kind of embarrassment or shame about pulling out my Purell and washing my hands before eating, maybe at a lunch table at a conference room, because people think I'm a weirdo. I don't think that goes. I didn't even think about this until you
Yeah,
said that. But
yeah.
now everybody's going to be like, "Hey, can I have your Purell? Can I share that with you?"
I,
Because it's
I
going to change.
well, no, okay. So you go. Can I have your Purell? Well, I don't know where your hands have been. You can't touch it. You know,
I do that now. I'm like, hey, put your hand out.
Put your hand out, yeah.
Put your hand out, little squeeze, and then don't touch my bottle.
There you go. There you go. All right, Mike. We'll
Good stuff.
finish. We'll finish it up there. Look, have a great day, and I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow.
Sounds good, Steve.
Take care, mate.